One of the first foreign leaders with whom Polish President-elect Karol Nawrocki spoke was Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda. The conversation took place on the initiative of Polish President Andrzej Duda, who is attending the NATO Eastern Flank Summit in Vilnius. However, this move is not accidental. Following this meeting, questions arose about what kind of international policy the president-elect will pursue. Although no specific details have been revealed yet, we can already point to details that may indicate the direction President Karol Nawrocki will take. This is the Polish nation's support for Karol Nawrocki, who announced and consistently said that he would continue the same policy that I inherited from President Lech Kaczyński, and which I have been pursuing all these years. It is no coincidence that one of Karol Nawrocki's first phone calls was to the president of Lithuania. Some would say that having the first phone call with President-elect Karol Nawrocki immediately after the meeting with President Andrzej Duda is symbolic. For our countries, it stands to reason. Centuries of shared history have made Lithuania and Poland neighbors, friends, and strategic allies for our freedom and yours. Although President-elect Nawrocki is not well known on the world political stage, he has the recommendation of President Andrzej Duda, and this significantly shortens the distance between the closest and most important allies of the presidential palace.
My congratulations to the president, new president of Poland, and I already congratulated by messaging, but I think that I hope that in the closest time we will have opportunity to speak. And Poland is our big friend and strong neighbor, and we respect the voting and of course voting of Polish people. And my congratulations to the new president and to all the Polish people. Thank you so much.
Analysts agree that in terms of foreign policy, we should expect a continuation of the actions initiated under the vision of Lech Kaczyński and Andrzej Duda. This seems to be a natural consequence of the common interest between Poland and the Baltic states when it comes to deterring aggression from the Russian Federation, hybrid warfare, or as we are seeing in Ukraine, outright direct warfare. Security policy is one of the most important areas in which there can be no void associated with the change in the office of the President of Poland. Hence, it is so important not only to ensure a smooth handover of duties, but also of political plans, which seem to be very similar between Duda and Nawrocki. We should build a real counterweight to the influence of Berlin and Paris in the European Union. That is, deepen cooperation within the Three Seas Initiative and NATO's eastern flank, which is essential for our security anyway. The concept of the Intermarium was revived in 2017 in Warsaw during the visit to Poland by Donald Trump, who supported President Duda in this endeavor.
I want to congratulate you on the great job you've done.
Today, President-elect Nawrocki has already had his first talks with the Americans, who know perfectly well who will replace Duda in office. This is a very strong signal, not only for our allies and neighbors, but above all, for the United States, which has repeatedly stated that the Three Seas Initiative is a very good area for economic cooperation. And Donald Trump has often said that Poland will be one of the countries that will work with the Americans to build the security potential of the Three Seas Initiative and of Europe as a whole. Importantly, from the first acknowledgments of congratulations received from Brussels, Paris, and Berlin, President-elect published on social media, it is clear that Karol Nawrocki expects unequivocal partnership relations from his Western partners, without avoiding difficult and sensitive topics.
The post-election picture of Polish politics is becoming increasingly interesting. Everything indicates that Prime Minister Donald Tusk, whose position is being undermined by successive politicians from the ruling camp, may be a victim of Rafał Trzaskowski's election defeat. Are we witnessing the beginning of the end of the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk? 3 days. That's how long it took Rafał Trzaskowski to speak publicly after losing the election. The power and energy that flows from Poles, but especially from the residents of Warsaw, because I am, after all, the president of Warsaw, motivates me to continue working hard. This power and energy may not be enough for Prime Minister Tusk, who has become a symbol of this electoral defeat. And although the would-be president argues, of course, I have confidence in the Prime Minister. We have been working together for many, many years. The mood in the coalition is not so rosy. The loudest criticism comes from the Polish People's Party, with Michał Kamiński leading the attack on Prime Minister Tusk. Who will believe today that a man who did not believe that Nawrocki would become the president and called him a pimp, did not believe that Trump would become president and called him a KGB agent, is capable of conducting effective Polish politics? When you watch Donald Trump's meeting with President Nawrocki, you and I will see a meeting between the Polish president and the American president, and Donald Tusk will see a meeting between a pimp and a KGB agent. I do not want a prime minister like that. Marek Sawicki, a veteran of Polish politics, strikes a similar tone. The senior marshal of the same from the PSL sees no future for Donald Tusk as head of government. It is high time to try a different prime minister, and it is not a matter of a vote of confidence, but a constructive vote of no confidence. And politicians should discuss this within the coalition on Tuesday, 15th of October. The current mood in the PSL is probably best reflected in this press conference. These are not happy faces. We did not manage to win these elections, but we believe that Rafał Trzaskowski still has his own perspective. Meanwhile, the other leg of the so-called third way, Polska 2050, now seems to be playing the role of opposition within the government. Its MPs have sent a letter to the Minister of Development regarding delays in the payment of funds for social housing. The most interesting thing is that Krzysztof Pasik from PSL, the closest ally of Polska 2050, is one of them. Why, despite enormous support for social housing, has not a single contract been signed in weeks, and the state subsidy fund stands at 0 zloty? Law and Justice's response to this political mess is to be a technical government whose main task will be to save the state finances. A government that, like the president, will be non-partisan, but that does not mean that, like the president, it will be so strongly supported by Law and Justice. The head of this government must be selected in talks with all those who would be willing to support such an idea. So far, there is no indication that the Law and Justice proposal will come into effect, as there is no political will in the current parliament. However, the very idea of a technical government has caused panic among some government politicians, as exemplified by Justice Minister Adam Bodnar. The idea of establishing a so-called technical government in Poland has one goal: to stop the process of holding Law and Justice politicians accountable for crimes committed during their 8 years in power. However, Prime Minister Donald Tusk's government continues to work and is not giving up on its goals. Prosecutorial proceedings are at an advanced stage, and with each passing month we will see their effects. This means that the authorities have completely failed to understand Sunday's defeat and will focus solely on political revenge. Former Polish President Lech Wałęsa strikes exactly the same tone. Since they have already threatened Tusk and all of us, we need to start cleaning up. I propose a list to be closed, starting with Kaczynski, Sienkiewicz and Macierewicz. The first three, so I'll do that again. Since they have already threatened Tusk and all of us, we need to start cleaning up. I propose a list be closed, starting with Kaczynski, Sienkiewicz and Macierewicz, the first three to be got shot off. But to prison, Mr. President? Of course, of course. And while right-wing parties are trying to grow in strength with MP Sławomir Zawiszak, And while right-wing parties are trying to gain strength with MP Sławomir Zawiszak joining Grzegorz Braun's crown and former volleyball world champion Marcin Możdżonek joining the Confederation, the ruling coalition is undergoing a serious crisis. A symbol of the problems is the fact that according to a survey by the OGB Institute, only 20% of Civic Coalition voters rate Donald Tusk's government very highly. Well, if the voters themselves are disappointed, what can we expect from the others? The United States is returning to the values that built the country, the important role of the family, a strong economy, safe streets and borders. This is what Donald Trump promised and is delivering. The Republican paved the way to victory and supported the then Citizens candidate and now President-elect Karol Nawrocki, welcoming him to the Oval Office of the White House.
He met with him at the White House and he told them, you're going to win because you support common sense, and he supported strong borders.
Donald Trump predicted that polls would choose a strong candidate who defends national interests and has a strong support not only from the American leader, but also from other important people in America, such as House Speaker Mike Johnson and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. It promises to be a win-win cooperation from which everyone can benefit. At a time when, for example, trade policy in the European Union is being determined at the Brussels level, having an ally in Poland, someone who understands the United States' position in Poland, is invaluable to the White House administration. On the other hand, there is a chance for a Conservative alliance and, so I'll do that again. On the one hand, there is a chance for a Conservative alliance, and on the other, for a broader geopolitical dimension that would be very favourable to Poland. It is obvious that Trump and Nawrocki share certain very important principles concerning values, border protection and patriotism. Karol Nawrocki's victory is therefore a guarantee of further Polish-American cooperation and an excellent example for others who would like to join the presidential alliance between Warsaw and Washington, an alliance based on values as reported by the prestigious Financial Times. MAGA-style campaign in Europe tested during knife-edge election in Poland. All the media outlets that are now writing about Karol Nawrocki's victory immediately say that he is an ally of Donald Trump, someone who will serve as a link to the US administration. But the United States did not do this for any reasons other than its own. The United States is looking at this very fresh, one might say very pragmatically. The United States is re-evaluating its entire involvement in the world.
President of the United States.
Donald Trump is reaching out to conservative forces around the world and building civilizational alliances, as even the US State Department describes it. Their foundations are to be security, the economy, and the family, which is what gave Donald Trump victory in America and Karol Nawrocki in Poland. Family, freedom of speech, faith and private property. These are the foundations of Western civilization. Americans talk about this and seek allies who share the same values. It didn't work in Canada, nor in Romania, where voters decided otherwise.
Giorgia Meloni.
Conservative Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni works closely with Trump, but also has her own commitments, including to the Eurozone, of which Italy is a member. As President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, independent of the December 13th coalition government, Karol Nawrocki will uphold the values that unite the White House and the presidential palace. He has already expressed this by responding to the congratulations of European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. I appreciate your message, and I'm also looking forward to good cooperation for the success of our union, a community of independent sovereign states. Our European legacy must always be based on mutual trust, respect for national sovereignty and Christian values. This is a clear sign that Karol Nawrocki will not bow to pressure from Berlin or Brussels, but intends to build a partnership with the European Union and an iron alliance with the United States. In the newly elected president, we have a partner of the Americans who believes in the same fundamental principles. Conservatives from different countries are joining forces and growing in strength, as demonstrated by the recent CPAC conference in Rzeszów, with the participation of Republica. The head of CPAC makes it clear. CPAC is leading the charge against globalization alongside our Davos deniers. Every day we remain committed to advancing conservative values and defending freedom across the globe. It is not the globalists from the Davos Economic Forum or the Brussels elites who should impose their economic or migration ideas on others. Strength lies in the diversity and independence of nation-states, say conservative politicians and experts. This is a completely new vision of international cooperation, in which there is no room for dictates from Berlin or Brussels. Instead, there is a strong alliance built on the economy, security, and family values.